Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Dolphin Financial Radio Show. Today, we're going to be talking about Social Security, in particular, how to fix this, because we know there's a problem. So we've done shows on this before and how we're going to go broke. You know, that's the rumor anyway. But if you do the math, you look at it, in the year 2033, we're going to have a problem. There's going to be 24% shortfall in Social Security payments. I get this question all the time. So one person that gets this question and asks me all the time is my co-host, Tony Shore, always asking me, is Social Security going to fail? What are we going to do? What are we going to talk about? So I figured we'd talk about it again. Now, we did a show. I'm going to put it up here in the past about how Social Security is going to collapse. And I think at that time, it was projected to collapse in 2035.
Right.
But I do believe Social Security disability payments are going to stop even earlier. But the new consensus of the recent reports say Social Security is going to go away, or no, not go away, be reduced by 2033.
Wow.
What do you think of that, Tony?
Here's another truth. Social Security is dying.
It's dying. It is. But aren't we all?
Yeah, that's true. We're all headed there. But yeah, I think that's crazy. And we've heard this story before, though. Like you said, we've talked about
Right.
it.
We've
And
talked
I
about
mean, back in the 80s, they said the same thing. Social Security is dying.
and they made changes to it.
But they made change. They raised the full retirement age. They
Mhm.
made a few other changes. They got rid of some of the some of the strategies, filing strategies to make more or pay less. So
more of it taxable. And so in that previous show, I talked about how I thought Biden administration would be the one to make the change. I said that if there's going to be a time when it happens, it's going to be under Biden. But that was right before he got elected. So that shows, dated already. But the problem hasn't gone away. But my attitude has changed. I don't know if Biden's going to make it happen. The political landscape right now is so divided. But
it's bad.
Here's a twist on this show, Tony. I found a resource that gives a glimmer of hope to this whole scenario.
Oh, really?
So I want to share that with everybody and then give you my take on how we will fix this, what I would do. Because in the last show, I said there's a couple of ways to fix it, but I'm going to tell you exactly how I would fix it. And it's going to be based on this new data I found. I want to share it. I'm pretty excited.
My Social Security problems.
Yes, because it is my problem because I'm not on it yet. It's your problem too. We're not on it.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. So right now, the way it works, Social Security, we each pay 6.2% of our wages into Social Security, and that's based on making up to $147,000. Now, once you make above that, you don't pay into Social Security anymore. Of course, the employer matches, so 13%, 12.5% go into Social Security every year of a person's wages on the first $147,000. The full retirement average benefit right now is $19.49 a month, which equates to about 40% of the person's average earnings through life. So the expectation is when you retire and if you wait till your full retirement age, which is going to be 67 for most people now, you'll get about 40% of what you were making pre-retirement. So not enough to live off of, theoretically, because we've talked about how much you need to retire. We've said you probably need just as much as you were making prior to.
Yeah, about 100% is what you're going to need. 40 isn't going to cut it.
Right. So 40%, not enough. Now, it's also progressive. Social Security is progressive. So that means that people that make less are going to get more. So you might be a lower income earner. You might, when you retire, get 73% of your pre-retirement earnings versus someone that's a high earner, they might only get a third.
Right.
So the average, if you wait till the full retirement age, is 40%, but if you're on the low end, you might get closer to 75. But what that means is you don't make a lot because it's not like they're, but as a percentage, the more you earn and put in the system, you get less back.
Yeah. Yep.
right? So that's the progressive nature of it. It's kind of like our tax system. The more you make, the higher percentage goes in to pay for everything. So now, why is there a shortfall? And then we're going to get into solutions in a minute, Tony. But
because of the baby boomers.
Baby boomers, all of a sudden, blame them. Blame it. Okay, boomer, we're blaming them. It's easy to blame the boomers, but there was more of them and less people born after that. So there's less workers now putting into the system. You know, a lot of people call Social Security a Ponzi scheme, right? But if you have less people putting money into the system and more people now taking from the system, add to that the people living longer, so they're being paid longer than we expected, and then throw in that wages haven't increased as much as the government projected they would increase. So that means there's less tax revenue than there was, because you pay as a percentage of your taxes. If you have less people earning wages that are higher, less going in the system. So all those combined, we got a problem.
Yeah.
Major
well, when Social Security was first introduced in like 1935, the full retirement age was about 65, or it eventually became 65. But people didn't live only 2-3 years, especially men didn't live more than 2 or 3 years beyond that. And men were the main ones paying into Social Security and earning Social Security at that time, because fewer women worked full time. So what you had is very little draw on the system, because men didn't live long. I mean, you might spend 3 years in retirement. You have 3 years of collecting Social Security, versus now you might have 30 years of collecting Social Security.
Right.
And
at the time it was made, there was a lot of different things then, but it also was not designed to be a full replacement of your income.
Right.
So we got to remember that.
Because there were pensions.
Right, because we had pensions. So
which we don't have anymore.
Right. So how do we fix this? Increase taxes, reduce benefits, or a combination of both? And so typically Republicans want to reduce the benefits, Democrats want to increase the taxes, and they fight and say, I'm not doing it, and we need the combo. And I thought
there's a proposal right now, right? A bipartisan proposal. I think it's bipartisan even, that would current plan that would increase taxes. What I found weird about what I read at the bullet points, I didn't see anywhere in there raising the full retirement age, which eventually I would assume they would do, but it mainly just talked about increasing the taxes, how much companies pay in, and some proposals to increase how much individuals pay in as well. But it would put the burden on wealthier individuals and companies, I think, is what I know they
I'll
want to
show
do.
you. So this is what, there's always going to be proposals to fix things and let's raise taxes, let's lower benefits. But in reality, the public, what does the public really want? Because they're supposed to represent us, these people, these representatives, these senators, whatever, House.
My side from the laughter at that joke, my side hurts, because
I found, Tony,
they represent what we want.
I found a very interesting website called the Program for Public Consultation. It's out of the School of Public Policy at the University of Maryland. Okay, and here's a link for the people that are watching.
This isn't one of those far right or far left crazy things, is it?
It might be a little liberal because it's at a university setting, which generally is liberal, but what it does is it put out a survey, and if you go to this link, you can actually take it.
Okay.
And what happens is it asks you questions about Social Security. First, it educates you. Says what's going on. Then it says, here's a proposal. I'll show you what they are. And the proposal A is here. Here's the pros. Here's the argument for it. Here's the argument against it. And it, right? And then it says, what do you think? And then you choose, right? So I went through this and I thought it was brilliant. It was well laid out. It wasn't I didn't see a huge bias where sometimes I'll be like, the way they worded it is so obvious. They want you to answer this way. So I found it pretty good. I'm going to go through what my recommendations are. And at the end, once you take it, it says, here, click this button, tell us who you are. And they identify who your local representative is. And then they send the results to your local representative.
Oh, wow. That's great.
This already. They took all this data and they sent it up to that committee that you described, and they created this new proposal using this data.
Oh,
And
wow.
what they found was a majority of Americans, both Democrat and Republican, agree to certain things. So let's go through these proposals and put the numbers, because what I found, the proposal is, well, let's just raise taxes or let's reduce benefits or whatever. What is the impact? It's nice to know. And what was interesting about this is that it shows you the actual impact that decision would make. For instance, the first of the many proposals was, let's reduce the monthly benefits for the top 20% or 30% or 50% of earners. So if you're in the top 20% earning bracket, you get a reduction of your Social Security benefits. The thought is, you don't need as much from Social Security because you have other money, right?
Right.
If you reduce the benefits to the top 20%, you reduce the shortfall that we have by 11%. If you reduce benefits for the top half of earners, you reduce the shortfall that we face by 30%. So you could see the more you reduce, obviously, the less of a shortfall we have. So believe it or not, I was looking at what the most, the 81% of people favored this one across the board. 78% Republicans, 86% Democrats. So obviously reducing benefits for the top earners seems like a Democratic thing, right? But reducing benefits in general, Republicans can get behind. So that's a bipartisan right there. I don't like the idea of reducing benefits for top people because that's like taxing the rich, and I'm not a huge fan of that. But I'll tell you exactly what my recommendations are at the end. So I thought that was interesting. Reducing benefits. Another proposal: raise the retirement age.
Yeah.
If right now, for most people, it's 67 now. As people getting closer and closer, there's less and less people that aren't already claiming that are 66 retirement age. It's somewhere in between, but for most people it's 67. If you increase the retirement age to 68, it reduces the shortfall by 14%. 69 and 70. If you make the full retirement age 70, it reduces the shortfall by 29%. So that's right. Interestingly enough, 75% of people, 75% Republicans, 76% Democrats favored reducing increasing the retirement age.
Yeah.
So
I'm all for that. I'm all for that and think it makes sense.
Why don't we do it? Now, the reason why we don't do it is because no one wants to touch Social Security. That's the third rail of politics.
No one wants to make it harder for people to get as much because that's a third rail. It's the hot rail. You don't want to touch it.
It really isn't, because a majority, 75% of Americans believe this. They can get behind it. You and I can get behind it. We see things different politically. It just makes sense. People living longer, right? You just said it. You started the show by saying people life expectancy was 60s when it was first created.
Yep.
Right? Now it's getting close to 90. So another proposal: make all wages over 400,000 subject to Social Security payroll tax. All right. So it stops at 147. The idea is, all right, let's stop it at 147. But once you hit 400 in earnings, we start taxing Social Security again. Look how much that reduces the shortfall by.
Huge. That's the one leave the other ones alone. I'll take this one. I like this one.
81% of people feel they can get behind this one. 79% of Republicans, 88% of Democrats get behind this one.
That's because they don't make over $400,000 a year, so it wouldn't affect.
It's a very small percent of the population that does this. Again, I don't like the idea. I'm that guy that says I don't like it because I want everyone to be treated equal.
Right.
I don't like progressive things in that regard. But when 80-something% of the population says we should do it.
But look at it. The shortfall isn't. It reduces the existing shortfall by that percentage. I was going to say, okay, because the shortfall isn't that big of a percentage, but I see what you mean. Yeah.
So the idea is, let's pick on the very few to help the masses.
Yeah.
Of course, a bunch of people can get behind it. Is it the right thing to do? I don't know. I think if you do a couple of these things in combination,
sure, they'll have to.
And the idea behind the 400,000 is in the argument for it was, well, we have a cost of living increase on that 147,000. So next year might be 155,000 that gets taxed. Eventually it'll get up to 400,000. So they're like, well, but then I'm like, then everything will be taxable. Every ounce of wages will be taxed for Social Security purposes.
Yeah.
The reason why I kind of don't like increasing the amount that goes into Social Security is because I don't want the government to have more money. Right. I'd rather it go to the people.
Right, because they abuse it. They abuse it. And there's arguments as to people argue, though, that the money that goes into Social Security isn't being abused. It's going into Social Security, and it's not being used for these whatever they call them, pork belly or whatever, these projects that are, the bridge to nowhere in Alaska or somebody's pet project or,
It's
that
always
type of thing. It's not touched. So I don't know about that argument, because I agree. The problem is if it gets into the general fund, or they can somehow borrow, and other people argue the government has borrowed from Social Security, and so if that can happen, then no, because the problem is the government it should only be there for Social Security. They shouldn't be able to touch it for anything else.
And that's fine, and so then it comes down to, do you believe in Social Security as a concept, or do you want to privatize it? And so if you're going to increase it like this by taxing more of the rich, you're just adding more ammunition to the government's coffers, because they're the ones controlling it. Do you believe in Social Security? That's the question. And
I do.
It's a tough one. But again, if we didn't have Social Security, looking at the way, and I interact with people all the time, so I'm not picking on any one set of population. I have people from all spectrums that I work with. Most don't do a very good job of saving for their own retirement. So the fact that Social Security is there is basically a safety net, as it should be. Sadly, many people don't know how to handle. So having a program like Social Security is useful. I would like to see someone be able to add to that, like their own pension, and that's a separate discussion, but that is also happening in some places too.
Yeah, I like that. I like that proposal where you could add in.
Okay. The next proposal is raise the payroll tax gradually from 6.5%, which is now to 7.2. And so
that's what I've heard that's been proposed. I saw a proposal that's right now in the works that would increase the Social Security payroll tax, the amount that comes out of your check and the amount your company pays. And I thought it was even bigger than that, but
it's like they're raising it 0.5 over so many years, or 0.05 a year over 20 years or something like that. So that reduces the shortfall. Obviously, the more you raise taxes, the lower the shortfall is going to be. I don't like raising taxes, so I was against this idea. For the same, it's just gonna really burden. And it's mainly because people like me that had to pay both sides of this. I had to pay my own, and I had to pay the employer.
That would really suck.
It's really, you're talking about increasing there, and they're the ones that are getting squeezed, right?
Yeah. So, if you're a small or independent business owner, that's terrible.
Right. And then, so what will I do? I will pay more people 1099, or I'll pay people in a way, or take revenue in a way that I don't pay taxes on it, and more tax evasion nonsense. That was the argument that they made in there. And you start raising taxes, more the rich will just come up with ways to avoid it. But when it comes to Social Security, it's hard to avoid because you got to pay your corporate version, half of it. People forget that the employer pays the other half. So, okay. Another proposal, raise the minimum Social Security benefit. Okay, so the proposals I just put on there that were on this, people voted on. And there were also some other ones, like Elizabeth Warren is really pushing for, which actually increased benefits. So it wasn't just how to fix the gap. It's also, well, if we're going to fix the gap, let's add some more reasons why we have a gap. So that was interesting. But one of them is to raise the minimum benefit to be 125% of poverty. The idea
I read that some people really want to raise it up.
Right. And so at first I'm like, get out of here. That's the stupidest idea. But then I started reading a little bit more about what they said. And they said, for those with 30 years of work history, Now, I think it should be 35 because that's what Social Security uses. They take your top 35. If you have 35 years of work history, then odds are you aren't trying to milk off the system, right?
Right. You put
35
in your
years is a long time to
You
work,
worked. Yeah.
right? It's not a huge amount of time. You think about it. Most people start working when they're 15, 20 years old, and they don't claim till 60. So they got 40, 50 years of work history. But so that's why 30 years, so raising the minimum, it's basically trying to say dignity and so forth. If you do that, you're going to add 7%. I'd like to see that 30 years go to 35 or even more. But again, the other proposal that was you could vote on, gradually increase benefits at age 81 to 85. They call that the very old. I don't know how you're measuring that now, but I think we all know people that are in their 80s.
Oh, sure.
Some don't seem very old. How about your grandfather? Where would he fall in this?
101.
Right. So what they're talking about doing is giving an extra 5% for the older people. Now, keep in mind, we have cost of living, which, by the way, Tony, I don't know if you've heard the rumblings as to what Social Security cost of living might be next year, because people
9%.
During the summer, they start to talk about what cost of living will be for the next year. What do we have in 2022? We saw a Social Security increase 5.9. The rumors and the rumblings in that we could see over 10%.
Oh, wow.
Social Security cost of living.
I heard like 9.5 or 10. Yeah.
When inflation is at 9 or the highest it's been forever, you could see a Social Security increase of over 10%.
Sure.
People are like, yeah, that makes sense. But think about what that's going to do to this whole system,
Yep.
And then the last proposal that was on this survey, I really recommend people go to this website and actually take this because it's amazing what you learn. Change the annual cost of living benefit to something more reflective of what elderly people are buying. Right now, I think it's the cost of living, the CPI urban, as opposed to the CPI elderly retiree index. You've been on this bandwagon for a while.
Oh man, the CPI is so inaccurate as to when healthcare costs go up 20% a year, and the cost of living adjustment that same year was 2%, 3%. And for a couple of years, we saw those increases in healthcare when the cost of living was 0 because it was based on the CPI. And
right,
they don't include things like energy or groceries and it doesn't reflect healthcare.
Right.
It doesn't reflect my health insurance rates that have gone up over the last 15 years. I'll tell you that.
So the talk is, in this case, it would increase the shortfall, so it would make things worse.
Sure.
By 12% if you use something more reflective of retirement persons.
I mean, reality. If they use reality rather than an algorithm that allows them to pay less, they're using an algorithm that they came up with that allows them to pay less.
Well, I think they're using an algorithm that was generic and they haven't moved to one that's more specific.
Right.
And because obviously it's going to cost the government more, so why would they? But at the same time, I've also seen some studies and data that show it doesn't matter which one they do because they're both very similar. Indexes. So,
sure.
But okay. So what I took this survey, and I'm going to tell you what my results were. So I answered all the questions how I saw fit.
Okay.
And with all my experience with Social Security, knowing a lot about it, but also factoring in my personal political and financial biases, it generated a letter to my congressman, right? And I copied and pasted what it says in my letter. I want to show you if you're surprised by what my recommendations are based on taking this survey. Number one, I recommend reducing benefits for the upper 20% of earners, which would reduce the shortfall by 11%. Now, one of the options in this survey was to reduce it for half, the top half. And I just felt that's too much. I don't know if I even want to reduce benefits for anybody. But if I thought I can get behind it for the upper 20% of Social Security earners. And that's mostly because in my experience, I've run into quite a few people that have said, I don't even want Social Security. They'll take it, but they don't need it. Right.
Yeah. Does Warren Buffett need Social Security?
Right. So
Does Elon Musk?
right now, but again,
Does Jimmy Buffett need Social
I don't
Security?
like taxing the rich. I'm not anti growth and wealth. So,
Sure.
but I said I could get behind a 20% top earners get a reduction.
Sure.
Not like slash and burn reduction, but just, make it right. So I was surprised at myself that I got behind that. I'm sure you're surprised too, that I've talked about reducing benefits for upper earners. Now, all the people that are watching that are in the upper brackets are going to come yelling at me saying, I'm not working with you. You want to steal my money. I recommend gradually raising the retirement age to 70 by 2064. Yep. This will help reduce the shortfall.
They're going to have to do that. That'll happen, right? I mean,
well, the other proposals on there are reduce it to 68 or increase it to 68 or 69. I said, just go to 70.
Well, by 2064, we're not talking about by tomorrow. We're talking about
it's gradual, like they did.
It's very gradual. I mean, 2064. Am I going to be? Let's see. What time is that?
Yeah, right.
I'm not going to be around.
I'm not. You're not taking your grandfather's steps. You're not. But if you think about that, that's why I said 70. And in fact, that's full retirement age. So then I think they should probably also increase it if you delay as well, because right now you can only delay to 70 and that's it. So if you're going to raise the full retirement age to 70, you should also give that extra bonus for people that want to delay, that do believe they're going to live a long life. So, and I'm sure you're not surprised that I agreed with that one.
I agree with that one too. So far, I'm with you on both those.
And here's the last one that I recommended. I recommend raising the minimum monthly benefit for those who have worked 30 years or more from 951 to 1341. So 125% of the poverty line. So this is actually adding to the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I agreed with it. And here's my logic. It wasn't, the point of it was to raise the very lowest earners, to give them dignity and so forth. And I was behind that. I thought, this is truly a safety net. But it was really designed for the people that have actually put into the system.
Right.
So it's not a true freebie. I'm against taking Social Security and just giving it to anybody.
Oh, yeah.
That didn't put into it. So this is for people that put into it, raise it so that they get above the poverty line, which is pretty darn low as it is.
It is.
So
I've worked 37 years. I did the math. I've been paying in for 37 years to Social Security.
Right. Now, I'm all for having a baseline minimum for you, because you put in that time, and I don't think it's unreasonable to burden out. That just makes it more of a burden. But I think in my case, I try to consider myself independent. I think you give and you take, and you come up with something that works for everyone, right? If you're going to raise the taxes on the rich, well, you better show me how you're going to improve the really poor and not just give it away to everybody. Yeah. Just take away from me, right? And keep status quo. Let's see something. And at the same time, if you're going to give more to people, I want to see you spend less as a government. So that's a different story. But you gotta come up with some conglomerate of them all.
Sure.
You can't solve this by just going in one direction.
Yeah.
So I think, to conclude, Social Security should be fixed. It has to be fixed. Or you just do away with it altogether, right?
With Social Security a thing of the past, she can't afford to retire.
We'll be honest with you. A lot of my clients, most of my clients, would not be able to afford to retire without Social Security.
Right.
They just don't have pensions.
Yes. Hi. She's having Social Security problems.
Right. Yeah.
They are. We all are. So I do think, though, that the solution is not as far off when you start looking at some of these Democrat Republicans coming together in the public. It's not as bad as the media makes it out. This guy's not terrible. This guy's not the next God, right? They all stink, right? But the public gets it. And I think if we can, so I recommend, I'm going to put it back up. Go here, look it up, or go to this website, public consultation survey, fill it out and send it to you. And it's all automated. So you don't even know who your congressman is. You just put your zip code and it knows, right? And what's the worst that can happen? The local congressman gets bombarded with emails saying, here's how you fix Social Security. Here's what I think, because you don't have to agree with all those proposals. You could say, no, don't do that one. That's part of the process. But we need to do something. So why not pick what you want to do and send it to your congressman? I strongly recommend you people do that.
Yeah, especially if you don't want them to raise the Social Security tax for individuals and companies. You might want to let your congressman and local, your state senator and people know, because I know that is a proposal that they're currently looking at.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So if we could do it in other ways, then let them know what other ways you want. But don't do nothing, because then what's going to happen? They're going to do something anyway. So have a voice. And this is an easy way to give your voice. And at the same time, get educated on the issues, right? You're watching this show to the end. Good for you. Hopefully you do it. But Tony, I did it. I think you were surprised at a few of the bleeding heart. I got to change my shirt. My blood's dripping from my heart. I know what your answers would be. Actually, what I'd like you to do, Tony, is I want you to do it. I want you to do it. And then we'll talk about what happened to you.
I will. Shoot me that link and I'll do it. And then I'll show you my results.
You got it. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. Don't sit on the sidelines when it comes to Social Security, because you're going to be one of those people that are complaining. This is your chance to get involved before things happen. So something's going to happen soon. At least I hope so, right?
Yeah.
Especially for these two.
All matters discussed in today's show are for informational purposes only.
This show is not investment advice.
Dan Riddle nor Dolphin Financial Group are affiliated or endorsed by any government agency.
Investment advisory services are offered through Dolphin Wealth Management, Inc., a registered investment advisor in the state of Florida.
Insurance products and services are offered through Dolphin Insurance, Inc.
Dolphin Wealth Management, Inc. and Dolphin Insurance, Inc. are affiliated companies doing businesses as Dolphin Financial Group.
You should talk to someone at Dolphin Financial Group before implementing any of these strategies or